If you want to know how ordinary people stay chained to a house for 30 years, I can tell you in one sentence, they follow the payment schedule the bank gave them and mistake it for neutral advice. It is not neutral advice. It is a profit machine designed to make the lender rich first and the homeowner rich last. I have spent my life looking at incentives. And when I look at a mortgage, I do not begin with granite countertops or paint colors or whether the kitchen island has enough room for 4 stools. I begin with the money trail. I want to know who gets paid first, how long they get paid, how much they get paid, and what has to happen for that flow of money to change direction. Once you see that clearly, the entire 30-year mortgage stops looking like a normal household expense and starts looking like what it really is. A very expensive agreement to rent money, and if you are not careful, you will spend the best earning years of your life doing exactly what the bank hoped you would do. You will celebrate the house, ignore the structure of the loan, make the payment every month, and slowly discover that years have gone by while most of your money has not been building your ownership at all. It has been feeding interest. That is the part most people never really feel in their bones. They hear the words mortgage payment and they imagine a fair split. Some of it goes to the bank, some of it goes to them, a normal trade, a balanced arrangement. That is not how the game is built. The bank wants its reward up front. In the example from your document, you buy a $437,000 house. You put 20% down, that means you finance about $350,000. Then you sign for a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7% interest. The monthly payment comes out to about $2,329. Most people hear that number and think the real burden is the monthly strain. It is not. The real burden is what that monthly payment becomes when multiplied by time. If you let that loan run the full 30 years the way the bank prefers, you do not merely buy a house for $437,000. You pay the cost of the house and then you hand over roughly another $488,000 in interest. By the time the whole thing is finished, you have sent out more than $900,000 to own a house that began at $437,000. That is the first shock. The second shock is even more important because it explains why the first 10 years of a mortgage can feel like motion without much progress. In year 1 of that same loan, more than $24,000 goes to interest, while only about $3,500 goes to principal. In plain English, roughly 87% of what you send in the first year is not building your ownership. It is rewarding the lender for allowing you to borrow the money in the first place. I want you to sit with that. You make the payment, you think you are advancing, you feel responsible, you feel adult, you feel like you are doing what everybody told you to do. And yet the overwhelming majority of that first year's effort goes straight into the banker's pocket. The cruel elegance of the amortization schedule is that it does not frighten you all at once. It drains you politely, quietly, predictably. It lets you feel like a homeowner while it treats you like a long-duration revenue stream. That is why the average person loses this battle before they ever understand the field they are standing on. They are trying to pay off a house. The bank is trying to stretch out interest. And the bank's system is far more sophisticated than the borrower's habits. Now, here is where most people make the wrong emotional turn. They hear those numbers and decide the problem is hopeless. They say, I do not have a windfall, I am not rich, I did not inherit a trust fund, I cannot throw huge sums at the mortgage, so they default back to the standard schedule and resign themselves to decades of interest. That resignation is expensive, because the truth is not that you must be rich to beat a 30-year mortgage. The truth is that you must become intentional. There is a big difference. I have seen ordinary families get surprising control over a mortgage, not because they suddenly became millionaires, but because they changed the rhythm of the payments, redirected extra money with discipline, and used the structure of the loan against itself. That is the real secret here. You are not trying to overpower the mortgage with magic. You are trying to interrupt the lender's favorite part of it, the interest. And the earlier you do that, the more leverage every extra dollar has. That point matters more than almost anything else in this story. So I am going to say it plainly. An extra dollar paid early is worth far more than an extra dollar paid late. Late in the loan, most of your payment is already going toward principal. Early in the loan, extra money attacks the part that is bleeding you the worst. It reduces the balance while the balance is still large enough to generate heavy interest charges. That means each early extra payment is not just reducing debt. It is erasing future interest that would have been calculated on that debt month after month after month. That is why people who get serious early can save extraordinary amounts of time and money, even without dramatic income. The first move is so simple that many people dismiss it, and that is a mistake. Make 13 mortgage payments a year instead of 12. That does not sound dramatic. It sounds almost too modest to matter, but modest moves repeated with precision can produce very unmodest results. If your normal monthly payment is $2,329, divide that by 2 and you get about $1,164.5. If instead of paying the full amount once a month, you pay half every 2 weeks, you end up making 26 half payments over the course of a year. 26 halves equal 13 full payments. That means the schedule quietly changes beneath your feet. You are no longer behaving like the bank's ideal borrower. You are now sending one extra full payment each year toward the mortgage. And if those extra dollars are applied to principal, that small structural change can cut about 5 years off the loan and save more than $90,000 in interest in the example you provided. That is not trivia. That is a major financial improvement created not by some heroic act but by a different payment cadence. People hear that and immediately ask the wrong question. They ask, how can such a small change create such a big result? The answer is that the mortgage is long, the interest is front-loaded, and time magnifies discipline. One extra payment in a single year does not look like much from 10 feet away. But one extra payment every year, always directed at principal. Attacks the loan during the years when the bank is feeding most aggressively on interest. The earlier years of a mortgage are where the lender's machine is strongest. That is exactly why pushing extra principal into that period changes the future so powerfully. If your lender does not make biweekly payments easy, there is another way to create the same effect. Take your monthly payment and divide it by 12, with a $2,329 payment that comes out to roughly $194 a month. Add that amount to each regular monthly payment, and now you are effectively creating that 13th annual payment without changing to a biweekly system. That means instead of paying $2,329, you pay about $2,523 each month. Again, the principal is the same. The extra money must go to principal, not to next month's bill, not to prepaid interest. Not to some vague holding bucket that makes the servicer happy, but leaves the actual balance mostly untouched. Principal, that word matters, because principal is the enemy of interest. The smaller the principal becomes, the less ground the bank has to charge you rent on borrowed money. Now that is the baseline move, that is the first rung on the ladder. It is powerful, but it is still the conservative version, if you really want to compress a mortgage dramatically. The second move is where seriousness begins. You start treating every surplus dollar in your life as a potential strike against the loan. This is where human behavior matters more than spreadsheets. When people get a raise, they usually upgrade their lifestyle when they get a bonus. They justify a reward when they get a tax refund. They act like it is found money. When they inherit something, they feel pressure to finally buy what they have denied themselves. I understand all of that. I also understand that the house does not care how noble your reasoning is. The interest meter continues running. If your aim is to break free of the mortgage early, every extra dollar has to be seen through a different lens. A bonus is not a consumption power. It is mortgage ammunition. A tax refund is not vacation money. It is mortgage ammunition. A side hustle is not just more income. It is mortgage ammunition. That shift in thinking is what separates the person who merely dreams of paying off the house early from the person who actually does it. In your source example, if you can find just an extra $200 a month and push it to principal, you can save roughly 6 years and about $108,000 in interest. If you can find an extra $500 a month, you can save roughly 12 years and around $200,000 in interest. Now pause right there. $500 a month is not easy for every family, but it is not fantasy either. It is about $16 or $17 a day. That is where this story gets uncomfortable in a productive way, because the question stops being whether the math works and becomes whether your spending is aligned with what you say you want. A family that says it wants freedom but leaks money through subscriptions vehicles, impulse upgrades, recurring indulgences, and lifestyle drift is not being oppressed by the mortgage alone. It is helping the mortgage win. That is why I always return to the same principle. Money goes where intention sends it. If there is no intention, it gets captured by whatever system is more organized than you are. The bank is organized, your random spending is not. So if you want to beat a mortgage in 7 years instead of 30, you cannot live on autopilot and expect an extraordinary result. You need a deliberate surplus. You need to create room. Sometimes that means earning more. Sometimes it means spending less. Often it means both. There are people who hear that and say it sounds too hard. Of course it is hard. It is supposed to be hard. You are trying to reclaim hundreds of thousands of dollars that the standard system has already penciled in for somebody else. There was never going to be a painless version of that, but there is a meaningful difference between pain with progress and pain without progress. A 30-year mortgage already hurts. The question is whether that hurt is buying you freedom quickly or slowly. Now let us go one layer deeper, because the third move in your source is the one most people never hear about, and it deserves more attention than it gets. Mortgage recasting. This is a wonderful example of why the world rewards people who understand structure instead of just slogans. Most people know about refinancing rates. Move down, they replace the old mortgage with a new one, they pay fees, they reset paperwork, and they begin another loan. Mortgage recasting is different. It does not replace the loan, it reshapes the payment. After you make a large lump sum principal reduction, that distinction matters. Let us say you still have that $350,000 mortgage. Then some event occurs. Maybe you receive a bonus. Maybe you sell something. Maybe you get an inheritance. Maybe you have simply been disciplined enough to build up cash for this purpose. You apply a meaningful lump sum toward principal. Suppose you cut the balance from $350,000 to $330,000. At that point, the underlying facts of the mortgage have changed. You owe less. But unless you act, the payment schedule may still behave as though the original structure is basically in place. This is where recasting becomes useful. With a recast, the lender recalculates your monthly payment based on the lower balance while keeping the same interest rate and generally the same loan term. That means your required monthly payment drops, and this is where the intelligent homeowner does something that changes the game. You keep paying the old higher amount. Suppose, just for illustration, that after the recast your payment falls from $2,329 to $2,200. If you continue paying $2,329 anyway, that extra $129 each month is effectively being forced toward principal, not because you came up with new money every month, but because you changed the structure underneath the payment. That is why I like this move. It uses a lump sum not only to reduce the balance immediately, but to turn the future payment stream more favorable to you. The lender required a smaller payment because the debt is smaller. You refuse to lower your effort. So the gap becomes an engine of accelerated payoff. That is a beautiful thing. When used well, it is not always available with every loan. And lenders vary. Some require a minimum lump sum, often $5,000 or $10,000. Some charge a modest fee, but compared with the cost and friction of refinancing, a recast can be much cheaper. And because you keep the same loan, you do not expose yourself to the risk of losing a favorable existing rate just to get the payment recalculated. That is especially important in a world where rates can move against you. People make a terrible mistake in finance all the time. They focus on the headline they have heard before instead of the mechanism actually in front of them. Refinance is a headline. People know. Recast is a mechanism fewer people understand, but mechanism is where the money is. Now let me make an argument that some people do not expect from me. I do not think every extra dollar should automatically go into a mortgage no matter what. I am a capital allocator. I care about opportunity cost. So I always ask a second question: what is the interest rate? And what could the money do elsewhere with similar certainty? That is the grown-up question, but there is another grown-up truth that people avoid. Most households do not actually take the invest the difference path with discipline. They use that argument as cover for loose spending. They say they could earn more in the market, but the extra cash never reaches the market in a consistent way. It gets absorbed by life. The theoretical spread exists only in conversation. So I am practical about this. If you truly invest systematically, understand risk, and have the temperament to stay rational in market declines, then there are cases where not prepaying the mortgage aggressively can make sense. But if paying down the mortgage is the move that will reliably happen in your real life, while investing the difference is the move that exists only in optimistic theory, then the mortgage payoff path may be the wiser one for you. Behavior beats fantasy. Always. This entire subject is really a story about behavior more than banking. The bank has a system, you need one too. And your system cannot depend on emotion. It must be mechanical enough to survive normal life. If you wait until you feel motivated every month, you will lose. If you leave extra cash sitting around without a defined job, you will lose. If bonuses arrive without a pre-written rule for where they go, you will lose. If you say you will pay extra when things calm down, you will lose because things never calm down permanently. Life always presents a reason not to be disciplined right now. That is why the most effective homeowners do not rely on heroic bursts of effort. They create automatic advantages. A biweekly setup, a monthly principal add on, A written rule that all raises or half of all raises go to the loan. A standing decision that all tax refunds go to principal. A side stream of income with a fixed allocation. A recast after every meaningful lump sum. Those systems create progress even when enthusiasm fades, and enthusiasm always fades. I have lived long enough to know that one of the most dangerous forces in personal finance is not stupidity. It is drift. Drift is what happens when nobody is openly being reckless, but nobody is steering either. The mortgage keeps drawing money, the years keep passing, the balance keeps shrinking, but not nearly fast enough. You keep earning, but not nearly aggressively enough, and one day you wake up to discover that what was supposed to be a home has also been a giant transfer of future options, trips not taken, businesses not started, retirement delayed, freedom postponed. That is what interest does when stretched over a long enough timeline. It eats optionality. That is why I do not like hearing people say, it's just the normal payment. Normal according to whom? Normal for the bank. Certainly normal for the person who never examines the structure. Yes, but not normal for someone who understands compounding incentives and control. To me, the normal payment is simply the minimum required to stay in the game. It is not a strategy, it is the floor. And if all you ever do is meet the floor, then you should not be surprised when the lender captures most of the upside for a very long time. Now imagine the emotional difference between two homeowners. The first makes the standard payment for years. They are responsible, they are obedient, they are exhausted, they know they own a home. But the numbers do not yet feel liberating. Their equity grows slowly. Their interest burden remains heavy. Their future is inching forward. The second homeowner studies the same loan and refuses to be passive. They add the equivalent of one extra payment a year, then a little more, then every bonus, then maybe a side income stream, then a lump sum and a recast every year. The debt shrinks faster than expected. Every year the interest forecast weakens. Every year psychological pressure falls because they can see the slope changing. Those are two very different lives being created under the surface of what outsiders might call the same house. This is why I tell people that finance is rarely about surface labels. The label says mortgage. The reality is whether the mortgage is controlling you or whether you are systematically shrinking its power over your future. And the beauty of this process is that you do not have to wait until the mortgage is gone to benefit from it. Every month you reduce principal faster, you improve your position. Every month you lower the future interest burden, you strengthen your balance sheet. Every lump sum redirected away from mindless spending and toward debt reduction is a vote for a different life. The goal is not merely to own a house free and clear. The goal is to get your cash flow back while you still have enough years left to do something wonderful with it. That point matters. A mortgage paid off at 75 is not the same gift as a mortgage paid off at 47. One returns breathing room. The other can return decades of agency. When people talk about paying off a 30-year mortgage in 7 years, they often focus on the headline because it sounds dramatic. But the real prize is not the headline. The real prize is the years of life that become more flexible when the fixed obligation disappears. Think about what happens after the mortgage ends. The monthly payment that used to leave your account no longer has to. That cash can be invested, saved, given, used to support family, used to reduce work stress, used to increase opportunity. You stop serving the old debt and start redirecting the same cash flow toward your own priorities. That is why I always tell people that paying off debt is not only subtraction done properly, it is future acquisition. You are acquiring flexibility. You are acquiring resilience. You are acquiring the right to make decisions without one giant monthly obligation sitting on your chest. If you are early in a mortgage, that should encourage you, because early is when extra principal is most powerful. If you are deep into a mortgage, that should not discourage you either, because structure still matters, behavior still matters, and reclaiming even part of your future interest burden is better than handing it over blindly for another decade. The people who win with money are not always the people who begin with the best numbers. Very often, they are the people who refuse to stay passive once they understand how the machine works. That is what this whole discussion comes down to. A mortgage is not evil, but it is absolutely designed to reward passivity. If you respond with precision instead of passivity, the arithmetic changes. You do not need an inheritance. You do not need a lottery ticket. You do not need magic. You need clarity, discipline, and a system strong enough to keep sending extra dollars where they matter most. So here is the way I would think about it. First, stop romanticizing the standard schedule. Second, understand that early extra principal is where the leverage lives. Third, create the baseline advantage by making the equivalent of 13 payments a year. Instead of 12. Fourth, treat raises, bonuses, refunds, and side income as ammunition, not entertainment. Fifth, if you can make a meaningful lump sum payment, ask whether recasting is available so the structure starts helping you instead of merely staying unchanged. And finally, remember why you are doing it, not to impress anybody, not to win some purity contest about debt, not because debt freedom sounds nice on a quote card. You do it because interest is expensive, time is precious, and the sooner you get that monthly payment off your back, the sooner your money can begin compounding for your life instead of for the bank. That is the real threshold. The day the mortgage stops dictating your options, the day your paycheck no longer arrives already spoken for by a lender, the day you realize that what used to be a 30-year sentence became a 7-year campaign because you stopped acting like the schedule was sacred. That is when the house finally starts to feel like yours.